What if the person you trusted most to protect your family was the very one who tore it apart? And what if the doctor who delivered your baby was hiding a betrayal that nearly cost your life? Avery and Lucas had it all: ambition, a new baby on the way, and a marriage built on what they thought was love. But the moment she gave birth alone, everything cracked. He didn't answer the calls. He wasn't there when it mattered most. And when she finally opened her eyes, the betrayal was already breathing in the same hospital walls. Because this isn't just a story about infidelity. It's about manipulation hidden in the people closest to you, a mistress disguised as support, a mentor cloaked in jealousy, and a mother who realizes too late the fall wasn't an accident. It was a setup. What if the person who stood beside your hospital bed was the same one who wanted you gone? Stay with us as we unravel a story of betrayal, justice, and the quiet fire of a woman who refused to be erased. Like, share, and subscribe to Shining Stories, because the deepest betrayals don't leave bruises, they leave questions. And now, let's begin. Mr. Bennett, your child has arrived, but something's not right. The voice through the phone was measured, yet urgent, slicing into the boardroom silence like a warning bell. Lucas Bennett, founder of Northfield Technologies and poster child of Silicon Valley success, froze mid-sentence. His fingers gripped the phone just enough to tremble. He hadn't even known his wife was at the hospital, let alone delivering their baby. It was mid-afternoon, and the quarterly review meeting was still underway. Charts, forecasts, expansion strategies, all halted. A dozen executives, mid-discussion, now stared at him. No one spoke. His phone slipped from his hand and hit the tile floor with a sharp, brittle crack. He didn't react, didn't pick it up. He stood as though the air had been knocked from his lungs. Lucas, someone murmured, "Do you need?" But he didn't answer. He simply turned and walked away, not in panic, not in haste, but like a man slowly waking from a dream that's turning into a nightmare. 6 hours earlier, in a modest hospital room tucked in the east wing of Rose Hill Memorial, Avery Bennett was curled up on the delivery bed, pale and alone. The only light came from a flickering monitor screen beside her, its rhythmic beeps the only sound interrupting the stillness. She had started feeling the cramps just past midnight. At first, she convinced herself it was just her body practicing false labor, nothing more. But the pain sharpened, and it stayed. She hailed a cab and came in without company, not because she wanted to, but because she had no other choice. She'd tried calling Lucas, again and again, voicemail every time, until finally, a single message came through cold. Impersonal, sir. Bennett is unavailable at the moment. Kindly leave a message. Her lips twisted into a hollow smile. Unavailable. I'm not a client. I'm his wife, about to give birth to his child. Now, as the pain surged, Avery stared blankly at the ceiling, her body tired, her heart even more so. Through the window, the sun was fading a slow descent into dusk, just like them. There was a time Lucas held her hand through every storm. Now, the only thing she could hold on to was the bed rail. He used to remember her coffee order, her fears, her dreams. That was before shareholders, headlines, and late nights at the office became his new obsession. The door creaked open. A nurse entered with a soft, practiced smile. "How are you hanging in, sweetheart?" Avery tried to reply, but the words caught. "It's overwhelming. You're doing just fine. We're almost there. The doctor will be in shortly." A warm hand touched her shoulder briefly before the nurse turned and stepped out. As the door closed behind her, the silence returned, and then a single tear escaped from the corner of Avery's eye. "I didn't picture it like this," she whispered into the empty room. A beat of silence passed, but maybe I always knew. Back to the present, Lucas moved swiftly through the pristine white hallways, the scent of antiseptic thick in the air. He passed gurneys, nurses, anxious families, but none of it registered. Hospitals had always made him uneasy. Now, they felt like judgment halls. Lucas had always avoided hospitals. The sterile scent, the hush of sadness, the subtle weight of grief that hung in the air. It all took him back to losing his mother in a room not unlike this. Each step he took felt heavier than the last, but he kept walking. He had to. At the front reception desk, words tumbled from his mouth with more urgency than control. My wife, Avery Bennett. She just had our baby. The nurse gave him a quick, efficient glance. Room 217, just past the elevators, to your left. He nodded once, then took off down the corridor. His footsteps echoed, fast and uneven, the soles of his shoes squeaking with every hurried step. His thoughts spun in every direction. Why didn't I know? Why didn't I answer her calls? What kind of man doesn't even realize his wife's in labor? He reached the door and stopped. His hand hovered over the handle. What if she didn't want to see him? What if she couldn't even look at him? He knocked, barely audible, and slowly pushed the door open. What he saw inside stopped him cold. Avery was lying motionless in the hospital bed. She looked worn thin, her skin pale, her hair damp with sweat. She wasn't looking at him. Her gaze was fixed on the small bassinet beside her. Inside it lay a baby girl, so tiny she seemed almost weightless. Her chest moved in shallow, uncertain breaths. Wires and tubes connected her to a nearby monitor that beeped steadily, mercilessly. Lucas took a step closer, then another. He wanted to say something, anything, but words felt too small. Avery, he finally whispered. She didn't respond, didn't flinch, didn't look his way. Her eyes stayed on the child. He moved closer and stood over the bassinet. And for the first time in years, his heart didn't feel armored, it felt exposed. The baby's breathing was irregular, delicate. She looked more like a whisper than a cry. A nurse stepped in, quietly checking the monitors. She's holding steady, she said gently, noting the panic in Lucas's expression. But she came a bit early. There are things we need to watch closely. He swallowed hard. What kind of things we're still testing? Could be developmental, neurological. It's too soon to tell. Lucas felt the floor shift beneath him. This wasn't a boardroom crisis or a product delay. This couldn't be smoothed over or rescheduled. This was his child, his wife, his failure to be there. He sat down on the narrow couch beside Avery's bed. Silence settled in the room like fog. Finally, he spoke, voice low and unsteady. I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know you were here. At last. Avery turned her head. Her face was expressionless, but her eyes held the echo of exhaustion that went deeper than physical pain. That's always the problem. Lucas, she said softly. You never know. Or if you do, it's always too late. He looked down, ashamed, and suddenly, he was back in their kitchen 2 months ago, the last time she had really tried to reach him. It was a quiet Wednesday. She'd made dinner, soft jazz playing in the background, candles lit not for romance, but for peace. He had walked in late, phone pressed to his ear, muttering about investors and projections. She had waited until he sat down before saying it. I'm pregnant. He didn't even lift his head. I know. That's great. Is it? She asked. Her voice barely a breath. He'd looked up, annoyed. What do you mean by that? It means, she said, that I'm doing this alone. You've missed every appointment, every milestone, every heartbeat. I'm building this for us. Avery, no, she replied, her voice sharper than he'd ever heard it. You're building it for you, for your empire, your reputation, your control. He had left the table without touching the food. They hadn't had a real conversation since, back in the hospital room. Lucas rose and stepped toward the bassinet again. A faint wheeze escaped the baby's lips, barely a sound, but enough to grip his heart. He reached down and placed one finger gently beside her hand. She didn't curl her fingers around it, but she was warm, alive, real. And in that moment, something cracked inside him, something cold, long frozen. It wasn't stress or pressure. It was guilt, regret, and a slow, painful love he hadn't earned yet. He turned back to Avery. "I want to make this right," he said. "I need to." Avery looked at him for a long time, her eyes clouded with a pain that ran deeper than words. Then, quietly, she shook her head. "This isn't something you can just mend. Lucas, not anymore," she said, voice steady but hollow. "Some breaks go beyond repair." The words landed with a weight that left him frozen where he stood. Then came the next blow, one he never saw coming. "I didn't fall," she said, voice trembling. "I was pushed." Lucas blinked, confused, but she wasn't being dramatic. She wasn't uncertain. She was terrified and completely sure. He moved toward her slowly, his feet heavy with dread. What are you saying?" His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Do you mean someone actually tried to hurt you?" Avery's hand brushed against her stomach flat now, where life had once stirred. She took a breath, voice cracking. "I wasn't alone that night," she said. "I heard someone inside the house. Footsteps. Before I could even turn around, someone grabbed me from behind and shoved me. I hit the stairs hard. I blacked out." His mouth went dry. "Did you see them? Anything at all? A face?" She shook her head. "No. They were quick, dressed in black. I didn't even have time to scream before it all went dark." Lucas's pulse thundered in his ears. This didn't make sense. Who would do something like that? "Why, I don't know who it was," Avery said, cutting off his spiraling thoughts. "But it wasn't an accident. I didn't slip. I was attacked." Her voice was firm now, quiet, but unshakable. The room fell into a heavy silence. Outside the window, dark clouds rolled across the sky as if the storm inside them had mirrored the one outside. He swallowed hard. "Why didn't you tell anyone? The nurses?" "The police." She looked away. "Because I was in agony, alone, afraid. Then they told me about our daughter, and everything else faded. I didn't want to cause more chaos. I didn't want it to be true. But you believe it now." She turned back to him slowly. "I don't just believe it. I know it. With every part of me." Lucas pressed his hands against his face, his jaw tightening. "Then we have to report this." "I already did," she replied without hesitation. He blinked. "You did." "A detective spoke to me while I was still in recovery. I told him everything. An investigation is already underway. Why didn't you let me know? Why didn't anyone?" Her reply came like a cold wind. "You didn't answer, Lucas, just like always." Hours later, he sat slouched in a stiff chair inside a small, beige waiting area on the hospital's 3rd floor. Nearby, a woman quietly wept into her sleeve. Nurses passed by in hushed motion, gliding through the hallway like clockwork. Lucas stared at his hands. They were trembling. His daughter was clinging to life in a machine-filled room down the hall. His wife had survived something that could have taken both of them, and he hadn't seen any of it coming. He'd been in conference calls, skimming emails, fine-tuning next quarter's rollout, and meanwhile, everything real, everything that mattered, was unraveling. He pulled out his phone, and the screen came alive with chaos, missed calls, unread texts, unopened emails. But one name stared back at him, the one that twisted his stomach into knots: Veronica. He hesitated, then opened their last exchange. "Hey, babe. Haven't heard from you since yesterday. Everything okay, miss you? Call me." Lucas stared at the screen. She didn't know. Not about the baby. Not about the hospital. Not about what had happened to Avery. Veronica was his assistant, but she had long since crossed the boundaries of professionalism. Late nights, long flights, shared looks that turned into shared secrets, and then more than that. It had begun harmless, until it wasn't. He had no idea whether Avery ever suspected, but at this moment, none of that mattered. All of it, the flirting, the secrecy, the lies, felt toxic now. He deleted the message, then erased the entire thread. He stared at the blank screen. It didn't make him feel cleaner, only more exposed. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a question began to form, one he wasn't ready to say out loud. Was this just betrayal, or was it something more? The man standing at the hospital entrance didn't raise his voice, didn't carry a badge on display, but Lucas could feel it, the quiet gravity, the sharpness behind calm eyes. Detective Raymond Ellis was in his mid-40s, tall and composed, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without asking for it. Lucas approached him, heart pounding. The detective extended a firm hand. "I'm heading the case regarding what your wife reported. She's in room 217, correct?" Lucas nodded. "Yes. Thank you for coming so quickly." Raymond gave a short nod. "This isn't something we take lightly. Mr. Bennett, if someone forced your wife down a flight of stairs while pregnant, we're dealing with more than just an accident." Lucas exhaled. "Do you think she was targeted?" "We're not ruling anything out," the detective said plainly. "But we begin with facts, evidence, access." He paused. "We'll need a list. Everyone who's been in or around your home in the last 2 weeks. House staff, friends, delivery drivers, anyone with a reason to be there." Lucas rubbed his forehead. "That's going to be a long list. We've got cleaners, building maintenance, our driver, a few tech contractors, and I'll need your home surveillance footage," the detective added. "All of it. I'll have my assistant send that over." Detective Ellis's expression shifted just slightly. "I'd recommend not involving anyone else just yet, especially not your assistant, until we know more. Silence is your safest option." Lucas hesitated. "That hit too close." "Understood," he replied quietly. The detective studied him for a beat longer. "Is there anyone at all, who might have had reason to harm your wife?" Lucas didn't answer right away. His pause was just a second too long. Raymond raised an eyebrow. "Is there something I should know?" Lucas shifted his stance. "There's someone I've been involved with, outside of my marriage." The detective didn't blink. "Name Veronica Shaw. She's my executive assistant. Would your wife know about her?" Lucas looked down. "I don't think so, but I can't be sure." Raymond's tone remained even. "Would Ms. Shaw have any reason to want your wife out of the picture?" Lucas's head snapped up. "No, absolutely not. She wouldn't." But the detective didn't flinch. People do unexpected things when emotions are involved. Back inside the NICU, Avery stood at the glass, watching the machines breathe for their newborn. She'd named the baby Grace, because that's what this moment required most. Grace to endure, grace to hope, grace to believe that something broken could still be rebuilt. Behind her, she heard the soft creak of the door. Lucas stepped in, a cup of coffee in hand. "I thought you might want this," he said, voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer. He moved to stand beside her, both of them gazing down at the tiny life they had created. "She looks so fragile," he murmured. Avery nodded slowly. "But she's tougher than she looks." The room fell silent, not awkward, just heavy. Eventually, Lucas cleared his throat. The detective came by. He said, "He asked me about Veronica." Avery turned her head just slightly. "I figured he would. You knew I'm not blind." "Lucas." Her voice was calm, but distant. "You were gone long before today. You missed every milestone, every quiet cry for help, and you started smelling like someone else's perfume." Lucas dropped his gaze. "I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did, and I ended it today. That's the truth." She finally turned to look at him. There was no hatred in her eyes, only fatigue. "I'm not angry anymore," she said. "I just stopped trying to compete with everything else in your life." His voice broke. "But I'm here now. I want to make it right. I want to be with you, with her." Avery looked back through the glass at their daughter. "Then be here," she said softly. "But don't do it to fix your guilt. Lucas, do it because she deserves someone who shows up." Avery's eyes didn't leave the incubator. "If you're going to stay, then stay," she said, her voice flat but calm. "But not for me. Do it for her." Lucas nodded, but his throat tightened. She wasn't angry anymore, and somehow that made it worse. The next morning, his phone buzzed. It was Detective Ellis. "We've reviewed the footage from your home security system," the detective said. "There's a problem. A gap between 1 a.m. and 3 30 Tay, Mim. The exact window when your wife says she was attacked. Lucas sat up straighter. What kind of gap? It's missing, Ellis said plainly. Someone removed it, manually. They used an administrative access code. Lucas felt his breath catch. There are only two people who know that code, he said slowly. Myself and Veronica. There was a pause on the line. Do you know where she was that night? Ellis asked. She told me she was at home, texted me around 11. I didn't reply. Lucas hesitated. Would you like to speak with her? I will. But let me ask you this first. Your wife mentioned something new, said that when she fell, she caught a scent. Lucas's stomach sank before the words even landed. A perfume. Sweet. Floral. She thinks it was gardenia. And just like that, something inside him turned cold. He remembered that exact fragrance on his office chair, on his collar, in his car after late rides. Veronica's favorite. That night, Lucas found himself parked outside Veronica's apartment, engine idling, his hand tight around the steering wheel. Her lights were on. A silhouette moved inside. He hadn't warned her, hadn't said a word about the missing footage, or the detective, or the scent Avery had remembered. He opened his phone, typed a message, then erased it. Whatever came next, it needed to be face-to-face. He stepped out into the cool evening air, heart thudding, legs slightly unsteady. If Avery was right, if Veronica had been involved, then what he'd done wasn't just betrayal. It may have opened the door to something far more dangerous. He reached the door to her building, climbed the stairs, and paused in front of apartment 3B. He raised his hand to knock and hesitated. Each second felt heavier than the last. The scent of gardenia seemed to drift toward him like a ghost he couldn't escape. He knocked. Footsteps shuffled, and then the door opened. Veronica stood there casual, warm, her face free of makeup except for a soft, rose-colored lip tint. She wore a loose sweater, leggings, her hair tied back in a low ponytail. Lucas, she said with a soft smile. You didn't text. I wasn't expecting you. I know. He struggled to keep his voice from shaking. Mind if I come in? She stepped aside. Of course. The apartment smelled like her familiar, layered, that same floral sweetness with a trace of vanilla. It hit him immediately, exactly as Avery had described. Veronica led him into the living room, coffee tea. He didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the room. It was tidy, warm, lived in. On the coffee table, a ceramic mug still steamed faintly. A pale pink lipstick mark clung to the rim, the same shade that had stained his collar 2 nights ago, the same one he'd found on the armrest of his office couch. His voice was quiet, but sharp. Where were you 2 nights ago? She blinked. Here. Why, what time did you go to bed? I don't know, she said, caught off guard. Midnight. Maybe a little after. I put on a movie. Lucas pulled out his phone and held it up. This was the last message you sent me. 11:42 p.m. After that, nothing. You said good night. And then nothing. Lucas said, his voice low, almost disbelieving. You didn't follow up. You didn't check in. Not even a single message after that. Veronica's brow furrowed. You've been pulling away for weeks. I figured you just needed space. I didn't think it was anything more. Lucas exhaled, slow and strained. There's a problem with my security footage, he said. The recordings from the night Avery was attacked are gone. Veronica blinked. What do you mean, gone? They were erased, he replied, stepping closer, deliberately. Someone logged in with my private access code and deleted everything from the system. Her face went pale. And you think? I did it. I'm asking if you had the code, he said carefully. Veronica's voice sharpened. You think I tried to hurt her, that I would go that far? He didn't answer. He just stared, unsure whether he was hoping for denial or truth. Her hands began to tremble. I cared about you. Lucas, I still do, but I would never lay a hand on her. or on your child. That's not who I am." He stepped back, confusion swirling into dread. "Then why does everything seem to point to you?" His voice cracked. "Why does every sign bring me right back to you?" She folded her arms tightly across her chest. "Because you're scared," she snapped. "You feel guilty, and you're searching for someone to blame, anyone but yourself." Her words stung because deep down, a part of him knew she might be right. Lucas ran a hand across his face. "Then help me understand. Be honest. Where were you really that night? Can anyone confirm it?" She looked away. "No, I was alone." "Then you have nothing to prove otherwise." Tears welled in her eyes. "I can't believe you're doing this," she whispered. He turned toward the door. "Neither can I." But before he could leave, her voice stopped him cold. "I didn't erase the footage, Lucas, but I know someone who might have." He turned slowly. "Who?" Veronica hesitated just for a beat. "Your driver, Marcus, later that night." Lucas sat once again in his car, this time in front of a quiet apartment complex on the edge of the city. He'd known Marcus for 5 years, a man of few words, reliable, loyal, the kind of person who blended into the background but missed nothing. He'd driven Lucas through red-eye flights, company retreats, and arguments he never commented on. And Marcus had access to the garage and the code. Lucas rang the bell. Moments later, Marcus opened the door, dressed in a plain t-shirt and jeans. His expression showed surprise, but not guilt. "Mr. Bennett, is something wrong? I need to talk. Privately?" Marcus stepped aside, letting him in. The apartment was modest but spotless. A photograph of his daughter, maybe 8 or 9, stood proudly on a side table. Lucas remembered meeting her at a company picnic once. "What's going on?" Marcus asked as he closed the door. Lucas stood still for a moment, then said plainly, "I need the truth." "Marcus, I'm not here to play games. I'm listening. Did you go to my house the night Avery was hurt?" Marcus frowned. "No. I was off duty." "Why would I?" "The police traced the deletion of my home surveillance system to someone using the admin code," Lucas said carefully. "Only 3 people had it. You, me, and Veronica." Marcus's expression darkened with surprise. "You think I wiped your cameras? I don't know what to think anymore." There was a long pause. Then Marcus sighed, walked over to a drawer near the TV, and pulled out a small black flash drive. He handed it over. Lucas stared. "What is this backup files?" Marcus said. "I started making copies of your surveillance system every night I worked. Just in case. This one's from the night in question. At least what was left before someone wiped it." Lucas looked down at the device, stunned. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because I didn't want to get dragged into something I didn't understand. But now I think you need to see what's on it." An hour later, Lucas sat across from Detective Ellis in a quiet conference room at the police station. The only light came from the glow of a laptop screen. The footage was grainy but legible. A timestamp marked the moment, 1:42 a.m. The camera showed the rarely used side entrance of Lucas's house, normally locked, almost never accessed. And then a figure appeared on screen. The footage flickered, and then there it was. A shadowed figure emerged on the screen, clothed in dark fabric, a hood pulled over their head. They moved with unsettling ease, not like an intruder, but like someone who'd walked that path before. No pause, no force, just silent, confident entry. Detective Ellis hit the spacebar, pausing the frame. "Enhance that," he said. Lucas leaned in, heart pounding. As the image sharpened, the figure turned for a fraction of a second. The hood slipped just slightly, revealing a cascade of dark hair. Then the face turned toward the camera. 1 second. That's all it took. Lucas felt like the floor had dropped beneath him. "Veronica," he whispered, barely able to say her name. There was no doubt it was her, the woman he'd trusted, the woman he had shared too much with, the woman he had almost destroyed his marriage for. She had walked into his home, and now his child was clinging to life. Detective Ellis sat back slowly. "That confirms it." Lucas's voice cracked. Why would she do this? Ellis didn't blink. You said she didn't know about the baby. But maybe she did. Maybe she saw your wife as the reason she'd never have all of you. Lucas ran a hand over his mouth. She told me she loved me. Sometimes love, Ellis said flatly, is just control wearing a pretty disguise. He clicked off the monitor. With this video, she won't walk away. The next morning, Lucas stood by the glass wall of the NICU, watching tiny breaths rise and fall inside the incubator. Grace was stable, still small, still fragile, but no longer fading. Avery stood beside him. She hadn't said a word since he walked in. I saw the video, Lucas said quietly. It was her, Veronica. She's the one who came into our home. Avery didn't move, didn't blink. She's been taken into custody. He added, the evidence is clear. Still, no reply. Lucas swallowed hard. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to be here, not for redemption for Grace, for you, if you'll let me. After a long silence, Avery turned her head slightly. Her voice, when it came, was soft, not angry, just tired. You shattered something in me, Lucas, but you also gave me her. She nodded toward their daughter. I don't need another apology. I need proof. In actions, not words. He nodded slowly, one day at a time. That's all I ask. They stood side by side, not healed, not whole, but no longer drowning in secrets. The truth had finally risen, and in its harsh light, maybe something better could grow. The next day, the hospital no longer felt like a place of quiet routine. It had changed. The brightness of the halls now felt cold, clinical, as though every corner remembered what had been revealed. The nurses still moved quickly, caring for babies and whispering updates, but the warmth in their voices was gone, replaced by careful glances and hushed conversations. Lucas knew why. Everyone knew. They'd heard about Veronica, the break-in, the betrayal, the investigation, and now, the hallway whispers followed him like shadows. But that wasn't what haunted him most. It was the way Avery had begun to disappear, not physically, but emotionally. There were no more outbursts, no tears, just distance, measured silence. He had tried to explain, tried to show her that he was remorseful, but her eyes no longer looked at him the way they once had. He sat in the waiting area, eyes locked on Grace's tiny body behind the glass. She fought for every breath, her chest fluttering with each inhale like a fragile bird trying to take flight. Lucas leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. He didn't pray. But in that moment, he hoped with everything he had that she would one day walk out of this hospital, not wired to machines, not into a fractured world, but into light. Avery joined him after some time, her footsteps quiet but purposeful. She didn't say anything at first, just settled beside him, shoulder brushing the glass wall that separated them from their daughter. Her fingers grazed his hand, but the gesture lacked warmth, no affection, no invitation. Any updates, she asked softly. Her gaze locked on the incubator, nothing definitive. Lucas replied, "They're still running more tests." She nodded slowly. Her expression didn't shift. Her eyes never left their child. Lucas shifted in his seat, the weight of silence pressing down on him. "Avery," he began, voice tentative. "I know saying sorry doesn't undo any of this, but I need you to believe me. I never wanted you to get hurt." "I know," she said, just above a whisper, but she didn't look at him. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me," she continued, "but that doesn't change the fact that you did." Her words pierced deeper than any scream. He wanted to reach out, to close the distance between them, but it felt like trying to cross a canyon with nothing but regret. "I know," he repeated, his voice thick with remorse. "I'm not asking you to forget. I just want to prove that I'm not who I used to be." For the first time, Avery turned to look at him. Her eyes weren't angry, they were tired, not just physically. Something inside her had worn down. "You're trying," she said, "but I don't know if that's going to be enough." Lucas couldn't respond. What words could fix what he had broken? The only thing he had left was what he did next. Where is she now? Avery asked suddenly, her voice tighter. Veronica. The name made him wince. He could still picture her face, the charm, the lies now exposed. She's in custody, he said carefully, still under questioning. But they've got enough to hold her. I don't think she's getting away this time. Avery's voice dropped low, firm. You don't think she acted alone, do you? Lucas hesitated. Until that moment, he hadn't considered a wider conspiracy. But the precision of what happened, the timing, the access, it couldn't have been just one person. No, he admitted. She had help. She had to. Avery's jaw tensed. I don't trust anyone anymore, she said flatly. Not even you. It hurt. But he understood. He had given her every reason to feel that way. Still, he couldn't let it end like this. Not for her. Not for Grace. I'm going to find out who else was involved, he said quietly, but with conviction. And I'll make sure they're held accountable, no matter what it takes. The following day. Lucas sat across from Detective Ellis in a conference room at the precinct. Stacks of files, footage reels, transcripts from hours of interrogation. The room felt heavy with unanswered questions. She's still stonewalling us, Ellis said, leaning back in his chair, claimed she was framed, that someone else set her up. Lucas narrowed his eyes. Did she give a name? Not yet, Ellis replied. She's dancing around it. But I don't buy her act. She's hiding something or someone. Lucas's mind reeled. Veronica had always been calculated, controlled. She wouldn't fold easily. If she was covering for someone, there had to be a reason. We'll break through, the detective said, tapping a pen against the table. But in the meantime, our focus is shifting. We need to find out who else had something to gain. Someone who gave her access. Someone who helped make this happen. Lucas nodded, jaw clenched. They were closer now. But the truth, the whole truth, was still just out of reach. There has to be someone else, Lucas said, voice low but firm. She wasn't doing this on her own. Detective Ellis gave a slow nod. Start with your circle. Talk to the people closest to you, the ones who've had access, the ones you never questioned. Let's see what turns up. Back at the hospital. Lucas couldn't quiet the tension coiling in his chest. Even with Grace showing signs of strength, even with the truth about Veronica out, the feeling wouldn't leave him. Something was still buried, something darker. Veronica hadn't acted alone. Of that, he was certain. And if she hadn't, who had driven by instinct? Lucas decided to return to the one place he hadn't been in days, his office. The building felt hollow when he arrived. The sun had already dipped behind the skyline, casting shadows across the empty reception. Only a few security guards lingered, nodding politely as he passed. He took the elevator to the top floor. His office greeted him with silence and the familiar scent of cedar polish and old ambition. Sitting down at his desk, he opened his laptop. His fingers moved on muscle memory, pulling up recent reports, financial statements, vendor logs, all clean. Nothing jumped out. No signs of corruption or unusual activity. But then a memory surfaced. The night Veronica came to his house, she'd been nervous, off. She'd talked too much and said too little, like she was hiding something. He opened his inbox, and there it was, a message from an unlisted sender. No subject. Just one line of text. You don't know the full story. Veronica isn't who you think she is. Lucas froze, his pulse spiked. He clicked to open it, expecting an attachment or further detail, but there was nothing more. No signature, no context, just those chilling words. He sat back in his chair, the room suddenly too quiet. Who sent this? How did they know? His hands hovered over the keyboard. He started to type, "Who are you? What do you know about her?" But something stopped him. What if this was just another manipulation, another piece of a larger, hidden game? After a long pause, he deleted the draft. Whoever this was, they were watching, and they wanted him to squirm. The days that followed blurred together. Avery remained distant. She focused on Grace's breathing, her vitals, the doctor's careful words. When she spoke to Lucas, it was brief, functional. The warmth between them had turned to ash. Meanwhile, Lucas dug deeper. He asked colleagues, cross-referenced travel logs, looked for anything, a slip, a hint, a whisper tied to Veronica, but every lead dissolved into silence. Until one evening, as he sat once again at his office desk, his screen lit up with a second message from the same anonymous source. Veronica isn't the one calling the shots. She's just a pawn, the real player. Closer than you think. That was it. No name, no timestamp, no instructions, just that. And it was enough to send a chill straight through him. His breath caught. Closer than you think. Someone near. Someone trusted. Someone he never suspected. He closed his eyes and scanned his mind, person by person. And then, like a lightning strike, it came to him. One name, the only one he hadn't questioned. The one person who had always been there. In the background. Helping, watching, waiting. He had been there all along. Watching, waiting, orchestrating. Lucas's heartbeat picked up pace. If he didn't act now, he might lose any chance of stopping what had started. Inside the NICU. Avery stood quietly by Grace's side. She hadn't moved in over an hour. Her eyes never left their daughter, even as the machines clicked and beeped in their constant rhythm. But her mind wasn't in the room. It was lost in a loop of everything that had shattered. The betrayal, the confusion, the aching silence that had replaced comfort. Veronica's arrest hadn't brought her peace, nor had the vague, anonymous messages that Ethan still hadn't explained. And what cut deepest wasn't the lies, it was the missing pieces. The feeling that something still didn't make sense. One question haunted her more than all the others. Why had Lucas pulled away at the exact moment she needed him most? Why had Veronica targeted her so personally, so violently, and why, even now, did the truth feel incomplete? Lately, Lucas had changed again, not broken like before, but alert, intense, like a man chasing a shadow. He barely slept. He rarely looked her in the eye. His phone buzzed constantly, and he never let it out of sight. Avery sensed it. Something else was coming. Something bigger. She turned away from Grace's incubator, her chest heavy. The air inside the NICU suddenly felt too thin. She stepped into the hallway in search of breath. Meanwhile, Lucas sat parked alone beneath a flickering light in the farthest corner of the hospital lot. The latest message was still open on his phone. Veronica wasn't behind it. She's just a pawn. The one truly responsible is closer than you realize. The words had replayed in his mind on a loop. He hadn't told Avery. Not yet. Because what if the person behind all of this was someone she trusted too? He read the message again, line by line. It made his stomach twist. And then, like a thread being tugged, a memory surfaced. Months ago, a gala. He had introduced Veronica to someone important, someone both he and Avery admired. Dr. Lillian Marks, Avery's mentor, the head of neonatal care, the very woman leading Grace's medical team. Back then, it had seemed harmless, a polite exchange, a few smiles. But now, Lucas remembered the glance between them. Brief, calculated, too knowing. He didn't know why it stood out now, but it did. Without another second's hesitation, he started the car and headed across campus toward the hospital's admin building. That's where they kept the access logs, the hallway cameras, the secrets behind every locked door. He didn't have the clearance, but he knew someone who did. Kevin, the night shift security tech, had worked there for years, quiet, dependable, and someone Lucas had helped once, long ago. 20 minutes later, Lucas stood inside a small, dimly lit room filled with glowing monitors and the low hum of surveillance feeds. Kevin looked up, coffee in hand. "You're not hospital staff anymore." "Lucas," he said with a smirk, "this is well above your clearance." "I'm not here as staff," Lucas said, his tone steady. "I'm here as a father, and I need your help." Kevin raised an eyebrow. "I need footage," Lucas continued, "from the NICU hallway, the last 6 weeks, and I need every keycard log tied to Veronica Shaw and Dr. Lillian Marks." Kevin paused. "You're serious?" Lucas didn't blink. Dead serious. A long silence hung between them. Kevin finally sighed and turned to his console. You know I could lose my job over this. You won't, Lucas said. And if you do, I'll make sure you never have to worry about working again. That was all Kevin needed, for nearly an hour. He scrolled through access logs and grainy video clips. Lucas sat beside him in tense silence, eyes scanning every frame. Then everything shifted. There they were, captured on the screen. Veronica and Dr. Lillian Marks, meeting in the quiet hallway just outside the NICU supply room. The timestamp read 2:18 a.m. No medical alerts, no scheduled rounds, no emergencies. And yet, there they were, speaking for several minutes. The footage had no audio, but body language said more than enough. Veronica fidgeting, clearly anxious. Dr. Marks calm, composed, almost entertained. And then, together. They looked toward the storage room, the one that housed backup servers, system feeds, and camera controls. Both women swiped their key cards. Both were granted access. Kevin leaned forward, brows furrowed. Why would the head of neonatal care be down here in the middle of the night with a non-staff guest? Lucas didn't need to guess. They weren't just having a chat, he said quietly. They were preparing something. The weight of the truth hit him hard. Dr. Marks, the woman who had comforted Avery through the stillbirth, who had stepped in when Lucas was absent, who had always seemed so supportive, had been manipulating things behind the scenes. He remembered the little things now. How she gently encouraged Avery to step back. How she reassured Lucas that everything was under control. How she was always present, too present, in every moment of crisis. Lucas felt his chest tighten. He had to tell Avery. But how she was on the rooftop garden when he found her, wrapped in twilight, the horizon blazing with burnt orange and gold. She didn't turn when he approached. He sat down beside her. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice careful. Still, she said nothing. "It's about Lillian." Avery's head turned sharply. Her eyes searched his face. What about her? He told her everything. The footage, the access logs, the security swipe data, the night visits, the collaboration with Veronica. Then he pulled out his phone and showed her the still frame Dr. Marks and Veronica side by side at the surveillance door. Avery stared at the image. Disbelief turned into fury. Then something else. Something deeper. "I trusted her," she whispered. "She held my hand when Grace was born." A pause. Her voice cracked. "She was with me when we lost Lily." Lucas looked at her, startled. Lily Avery nodded, her voice barely a breath. "I never told you her name. The twin we lost. I named her Lily in my heart, and Lillian was the only person I ever told." Lucas reached for her hand. This time, she let him. "We can't let her get away with this," Avery said, her voice quiet but full of fire. "But we don't confront her alone." That night, with the help of Detective Ellis, they made a plan. Avery sent a message, asking Dr. Marks to meet her in the hospital's consultation room. She said it was urgent, related to Grace's treatment. As expected, Lillian arrived right on time, professional, calm, smiling. Lucas and Ellis watched from a neighboring room, hidden cameras capturing every move. Avery stayed poised. "I wanted to thank you," she began, her voice tight but composed, "for being there, especially after Lily." Dr. Marks smiled kindly, hand on her chest. "Of course. My dear, it was an honor to support you." Avery nodded slowly. "There's something I need your advice on." She stood, moving toward her desk. "I found something strange. Some footage. A few emails. They concern Veronica." Lillian blinked, but the smile never left her face. "Footage," she repeated gently. "Yes," Avery said. Her tone shifted. She straightened her spine. "And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about." "Of you and her," Avery said, voice steady but cold. "Together, after hours. In restricted areas where neither of you had any reason to be." The smile faded from Dr. Marks's face. She stood up, hands at her sides. "Avery," she said, with forced calm. "Whatever it is you think you saw, I saw enough." Avery's voice cut like ice. I trusted you with my grief, with my child, with everything. And you used it, twisted it. Silence. Then a soft laugh escaped Dr. Marks's lips, refined, controlled. You don't know what you're accusing me of, she said, still composed. It doesn't matter, Avery snapped. The surveillance logs don't lie. You and Veronica accessed the system together, more than once. And just so you know, the police are waiting right outside. For the first time, Dr. Marks faltered. Her composure cracked just for a second, and she took a step toward the door. But before she could reach it, Lucas and Detective Ellis stepped inside, blocking her path. Dr. Marks's face shifted completely. No more mask, no more grace. She came to me, she hissed, voice shaking, begging, crying. You treated her like dirt. And she pointed at Lucas. He discarded her like trash. She wanted to destroy you both. I just gave her the chance. Why? Lucas asked, his voice strained. Her eyes burned. Because she stole everything, she snarled, glaring at Avery. The promotions, the praise. You were always the golden one. And I was always standing in your shadow. Avery stared, stunned. You destroyed our lives over envy. Dr. Marks scoffed. You're not the saint everyone thinks you are. Detective Ellis stepped forward and took her by the wrists, snapping the cuffs into place. You have the right to remain silent, he began. But Lillian wasn't finished. As they led her away, she turned to Lucas and Avery one last time. She might forgive you, Lucas, she said with venom, but every time she looks at your daughter, she'll remember what you cost her. And then she was gone. That night, Avery sat by Grace's side again. The rhythmic beeps of the monitors no longer frightened her. They were a steady lullaby, now a reminder of survival. Lucas stood quietly nearby. She turned to him, her voice low. You were right. No, he replied. We were both blind, but not anymore. Avery reached for his hand, and this time, she didn't let go. I'm not ready to say I forgive you, she said honestly, but I am ready to fight for her. With you. Lucas nodded, eyes rimmed with tears. That's all I need. They stood together, watching the soft rise and fall of Grace's breath. There were still wounds, but beneath them, something new had taken root, a quiet resilience. The truth had nearly torn them apart, but in the end, it was also what began to pull them back together. The courtroom was still. A hush wrapped around the room like a blanket too heavy to shake off. It filled every breath, every beat between sentences. Avery sat on the witness stand, her back straight, eyes forward. The morning sun filtered in through the tall windows, casting soft gold over cold marble. Outside, the world moved forward, but inside this room, it was about reckoning, justice, and truth. She looked across the courtroom. Dr. Lillian Marks sat beside her attorney, chin raised, still trying to project the same careful confidence she always had, but her eyes betrayed her. Every time they met Avery's, they flinched. Once, Avery had admired her, had trusted her guidance, her brilliance. Now, she was here to testify against her, when the prosecutor asked her to share her story. Avery took a deep breath. I met Dr. Marks 8 years ago, she began, voice steady. I was a second-year medical student. She was everything I wanted to become: brilliant, accomplished, respected. She paused. I never imagined she would become part of the most painful betrayal I'd ever face. Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. My husband Lucas and I to be continued. We were expecting twins, Avery said softly from the stand. But one day, I came home to discover my husband had been unfaithful, with a woman named Veronica. The courtroom fell into stillness. And she wasn't just having an affair, Avery continued. She was manipulating us both, and she wasn't working alone. She paused, her voice steady, but her eyes glistening. Dr. Lillian Marks was helping her. A ripple of gasps moved through the gallery, but Avery kept speaking. They accessed hospital surveillance systems to cover their tracks. They tampered with data. They violated our privacy. They spread rumors about my character. And worst of all, They weaponized my grief, my child's suffering. She didn't need to say more. Everyone in that room had seen the evidence, the camera footage, the emails, the secret meetings, the testimonies, the lies unraveling one by one. But Avery hadn't come here just to accuse. She had come to reclaim her voice. "I lost a child," she said. "My daughter, Lily, was stillborn." A single tear slid down her cheek, and in my darkest hour, these women used that pain for their own bitterness, for revenge. She took a breath. But I survived. My daughter Grace survived. And so did the truth. When Avery stepped down, the room was silent. From the back row, Lucas rose to his feet. Their eyes met not as husband and wife, but as two people who had weathered a storm they never saw coming. 2 months later, the verdict was handed down. Dr. Lillian Marks was found guilty on multiple counts: evidence manipulation, conspiracy, and professional misconduct. Veronica received her own sentence for stalking, false identity, and emotional coercion. Their careers were over, their reputations dismantled, their destruction had ended. But justice, while powerful, didn't erase the scars. Lucas moved out not long after the trial, not as punishment, not in anger, but because Avery needed room to breathe again. To find herself again outside the weight of betrayal. They remained a family, but now one slowly, cautiously rebuilt on honesty. Every day. Lucas visited Grace in the NICU. He sat beside her incubator, a children's book in his lap, tears often in his eyes. He whispered stories, apologies, promises. Avery watched from afar at first, unsure if she was ready, unsure what healing was supposed to look like. But as weeks passed, her heart began to soften, not because Lucas had done everything right, but because, finally, he understood the gravity of everything he had done wrong. 3 months later, Grace came home. The sky was gray, the pavement wet from a spring drizzle. But to Avery, the world felt newly washed, fresh, quiet, alive. Grace, once fragile, now cooed with curiosity. Her wide eyes blinked at the daylight for the first time. Avery held her close, overcome with emotion. Beside her, Lucas carried the car seat and diaper bag with quiet care. As they reached the car, Avery stopped. "I want you to stay the night," she said suddenly. Lucas looked at her, surprised. "Are you sure?" She nodded slowly. "You're her father, and I don't want her to begin this life without both of us beside her." That night, their home wasn't perfect, but it was full. The soft cries of a newborn, the shuffle of blankets, the whispered lullabies at midnight. No longer a house divided, but a place of slow, fragile hope. Lucas and Avery took turns, feeding, changing diapers, walking the floor late at night with Grace resting against their shoulders. They were tired, but for the first time in a long while, they were tired together. 6 months passed quietly. One crisp afternoon, Avery sat on a park bench. Around her, the world moved gently, mothers pushing strollers, toddlers tumbling through grass. Grace, now 6 months old, sat beside her, bundled in a soft yellow sweater, chewing intently on a teething toy. Lucas approached, 2 coffees in hand. They didn't talk much these days about the past, the affair, the betrayal, the unraveling truth. Some wounds ran too deep for daily conversation. But in quiet moments like this, Avery didn't dwell on the damage. She focused on what remained, what endured. "I want to tell you something," Lucas said, his voice low. She turned to look at him. "I've started therapy," he said, "not to win you back, but because I need to understand why I became the man who hurt you." Avery didn't answer right away. Her fingers curled around Grace's, warm and soft. "I'm glad," she said finally, "because that man wasn't always you." He nodded. "And you're not the woman who kept quiet anymore. I see that now. You're stronger." A smile touched her lips, real, unforced. "We both are." 1 year later. Grace's first birthday. The backyard was adorned with paper lanterns, soft ribbons, and pink balloons dancing in the breeze. Laughter echoed as friends gathered, camera shutters clicked, and the scent of cake and flowers filled the air. Grace sat in her high chair, cheeks smeared with frosting, giggling with delight. Avery stood under the shade of the canopy, heart full, eyes fixed on her daughter. So much had broken, and so much had healed. Lucas came beside her, holding a small wrapped box. She gave him a playful look. "What's this? Just open it," he said. Inside was a simple silver locket. When she opened it, her breath caught. 2 names, engraved inside Grace and Lily. "I wanted to honor both our daughters," Lucas said softly. "One who's with us, and one who always will be." Tears welled in her eyes. She looked at him, but words didn't come. "I don't know where we'll go from here," he continued. "Maybe we'll find each other again. Maybe not. But I promise to spend every day being the kind of father and man you and they deserve." Avery stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him, tightly, gratefully. She didn't say a word, because sometimes love doesn't need sound. Final reflections narrated in Avery's voice. The months passed. Grace took her first step, then her first word, and somewhere between bottle feedings and bedtime stories, I found peace. Not the kind that erases pain, but the kind that lives alongside it, grows around it. I didn't forget, but I forgave. I didn't go back. I moved forward. I didn't just survive betrayal. I outgrew it. And in Grace's eyes wide, bright, unafraid, I saw something I never expected to see again. Hope, not just her name, but the life we built around it. Because the greatest revenge isn't tearing down what hurt you. It's becoming unshakable. And I am. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones no one sees. Behind hospital doors, inside a quiet courtroom, between 2 people trying to pick up the pieces of what was once called love. Avery didn't choose this storm, but she chose to walk through it with grace, with strength, and with eyes wide open. And Lucas. He didn't ask for redemption, but he fought for it, not with promises, but with presence. In the end, this wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was about resilience, about healing, and about a little girl named Grace, who reminded them both what was truly worth fighting for. If this story moved you, if you saw a part of yourself in their journey, or if you simply believe in the power of second chances, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Because here at Shining Stories, we don't just tell stories, we shine a light on the human heart. Thank you for watching. And remember, even after the darkest nights, hope is always born again.